Hello, my dear viewers. I'm Olga Demchuk, a researcher of the inner world of personality. Today, I have prepared a topic for you. What kind of boss am I to myself? They say, give a person power and you'll find out who they really are. But we already have this unlimited power over ourselves. You can't run away from yourself. And you can't pretend on the inside the way you might with real subordinates. You manage yourself in precisely the same way you would manage a dedicated team. Of course, in a professional team environment, there are often significant restraining factors, such as the fear that valuable people might potentially quit. But when a person is held back by their own fear, it still manifests in some way. When we talk about personality, we are discussing the fundamental fact that it can be profoundly governed either by strict control or by thoughtful, deliberate thinking. We've discussed control many times, about how control is rigid, it doesn't take nuances into account, it doesn't consider changing circumstances. It's filled with certain instructions and rules. When a person asks, "What should I do?" they want to add another instruction to their system of control. But unfortunately, they're not yet ready to become wiser. They don't want to figure things out on their own. But on my channel, all I can offer is to encourage you to become wiser on your own and to learn to make decisions and choices independently. Today I've prepared 7 magical notes and 7 magical inscriptions for you. I ask you to write down these tasks, these points in your notes. When we take notes, we become more focused on the material, or if you're watching the video on your computer, you can write them down on your phone. If you're watching on your phone, you can pause, write them down, and then continue watching. How well do the tasks you've set align with reality? We have discussed that there is a conditionally ideal self and a conditionally real self. When we talk about the ideal self, it's not about something perfect. People say it's an idealistic perception, meaning a childlike perception, a perception that is too simplistic, not complex. And if a person has not come to know themselves, has not discovered their own personality, then their self-image will be somewhat complicated. But this image will only vaguely, like a rough draft or a sketch, resemble the true self. And so, with this unreal self, a person naturally sets themselves an unrealistic goal. And by setting this goal, it's as if they doom themselves to the status of a failure. At least that's how it seems to him. He thinks he has planned everything out, calculated everything. He begins to act, but in reality, nothing comes to fruition. In exactly the same way, this person will set tasks for their subordinates. Just as unrealistically, without any connection to their true selves. When a person carefully considers and meticulously makes their personal plans, they often do so within a kind of imaginative child's room, a space where they arrange various symbolic toys, assign them specific and predetermined roles, and then put carefully chosen words into their imagined mouths. And these toys move according to the will of the child who is playing with them. The bunny comes to the bear and says, "Bear, do this," and the bear does it. The bear goes to the doll Kate and tells Kate. In other words, this kind of planning, without taking real people or real circumstances into account, will inevitably lead a person to feel like a failure and not very smart. Our successes are vital to us. It is essential for us to have things work out sometimes. And if we don't set goals that are just a bit beyond our current abilities, we don't grow. In that case, we remain in the same place. If we set goals that are much too high compared to where we are now, achieving them might be possible in a burst of mania, through workaholism or through overexertion. But after this overexertion, there will inevitably be a setback. So it seems that we really need to know ourselves very well. We need to have a very clear understanding of what we are capable of so that the goal is manageable, but still beyond what we can do right now. Let's move on. We'll come back to this a bit later. When I talk with my clients and interact with people in group settings, I notice how often the factor of time is overlooked. Why does this happen? Because a person is under the influence of their own I want. I want it now. If I can't have it right now, then I don't want it at all. So this could be a goal, some kind of dream, or perhaps some growth, the acquisition of a new skill. These things become possible only after some time. But our emotional system doesn't understand what time is, because when we turn inward, there is no time there. There, it is a world named after oneself. It's like a person confusing day with night. This lack of synchronization with time, with real time, is felt in the way a person plans the possibility of achieving something. For example, let's say I'm a blogger and I start my own YouTube channel. How long will it take for me to get 100 subscribers? And all my feelings are shouting, tomorrow. I want to have 100 subscribers tomorrow. And if that doesn't happen, if a person is unable to break this down into stages, they are constantly under the pressure of their own sense of inadequacy, feeling like they can't achieve those 100 subscribers. So you see, if it's some kind of solid monolithic goal and it's not divided into specific stages, then I constantly feel somehow inadequate while I'm working toward this. If there are stages, it's as if I can check in at each one, moving through them step by step. You can break things down into stages if you are very attentive and detail-oriented. For example, let's take a simple situation. I need to go to the store and buy the necessary groceries. When I plan this, I set aside a certain amount of time for it. Let's say I have a lunch break and I need to get this done then. And when I plan this trip to the store, I don't really factor in, for example, if it's autumn outside like it is now, how I'll get dressed for the weather, putting on my coat, my shoes, and how I'll leave the place where I am. I need to allow time, for instance, just to get from the door to the elevator. Then the elevator goes down, and after that I walk. So all this time isn't usually taken into account. People usually think like this. Okay, it takes 15 minutes to get to the store, so I need 15 minutes. How much time will I spend in the store? 10 minutes. I'll just run in and buy some bread, that's all. And you see, this way, all these important little details aren't being considered. In other words, there is no understanding of achievement as a process that takes time and consists of certain stages. If a person sets goals for themselves without considering these stages, they will often feel dissatisfied with themselves, because it seems like it should only take 15 minutes to get to the store. But the time it takes to actually leave the house and start heading to the store, and then to walk back with a heavy bag from the store, is not just 15 plus 15, making 30 minutes. It might actually be 20 minutes there and say another 25 back. And the person doesn't understand where their time goes. It's as if they're losing it. But this time is lost precisely because they don't take these factors into account. You know, when I talk to people in real life, I notice that everything seems to happen too quickly for them. People for whom things move more slowly are usually those who are closer to their true selves. But when a person is caught up in an idealistic view, too closed off within themselves, everything happens too quickly for them. They want things to happen too fast. They want to become smarter quickly, to sort out their inner world quickly, to start earning money quickly. This happens because in subjectivity, emotions are in control and emotions push us forward. And because of this pushing and emotional pressure on oneself, there is a desire for things to happen quickly because it's unbearable to endure the pain that arises when I want something and can't fully satisfy that desire. So a person who is closed off within themselves is always in a rush, always wants results too quickly. Third, what is the proportion of chaos and order in a person's activity? How much time is spent doing nothing and how much on workaholism? When a person's activity is structured this way, it's either working a lot or doing nothing at all. This indicates that there is not yet integrity within the personality. The personality is fragmented. The personality is split into the part that seeks permissiveness, and our subjectivity does tend toward this permissiveness. And into the part that represents control, the very control we've discussed so much, which coerces, intimidates, and tells you that you won't survive, that you won't make any money, and so the person remaining in the paradigm of permissiveness does nothing or does something only, in order to then do nothing again. When I talk to people who work as employees, it seems to me that their main goal is to do as little as possible and get as much as possible. It's as if a person strives for a managerial position just so they can do nothing there. And this kind of mindset will always perceive the tasks at hand as a form of violence. When our personality contains a lot of infantile, subjective parts, then any workload feels like mockery. And the person starts to resist this. They postpone it, they don't do it, because from the very beginning they perceived it as violence against themselves. That's when procrastination arises, and the person ends up doing something at the very last moment. So, if your employees do everything at the last minute, you'll know why this happens. And you'll also start noticing your own cycles of workaholism and doing nothing. In this state of doing nothing, a person seems to just spread out like a puddle, and then through self-control, forcing themselves or even scaring themselves, they suddenly rush forward for a while and then falls back again. For some people, this period can even last several years, and then the person falls into depression. When a person's identity moves beyond the paradigm of a world centered on themselves, doing nothing will no longer be the meaning of life, because they will understand the meaninglessness of mere existence. In our subjectivity, it is enough for us to exist in a vegetative state, just as we did in our mother's womb. That is, to be fed and given drink, and to do nothing, simply remaining in a kind of half-sleep. When a person is mature, other goals begin to emerge. And then activity is perceived with genuine interest, with a profound sense of pleasure as a valuable opportunity to truly gain a strong and lasting sense of self-respect. Relationships with colleagues. This, in my opinion, is the most interesting point. Relationships with colleagues, whether individuality is taken into account, whether there is respect for feelings. We have already talked a little earlier about how important it is for us to consider our own characteristics. Many people, when you talk to them about taking individual traits into account, tend to recall their strengths, what they are capable of. And it is very undesirable to remember your own procrastination, to remember your inattentiveness, to remember the habit of getting distracted by something while working, to remember that you can't stay focused on something for a long time, to remember that if you set aside 2 hours for work, in reality, you'll only be productive for half an hour. So in other words, all of this is rather unpleasant and you don't want to internalize it. And when a person addresses themselves from the perspective of their ideal self, They don't approach their real self as someone who has all these traits I've described, but rather as if they're addressing a magic goldfish. Or more precisely, like the old woman to the old man and the old man to the goldfish. That is as if saying to the genie in the lamp, "Do this for me." And there's no consideration, no allowance for weaknesses, and that crucial factor of time isn't taken into account either. And when we talked about the first point, how realistic the goals being set are, if such a person ends up in a team and starts collaborating, they will also encounter problems with colleagues, with management, and with subordinates if they are in a leadership position. If you don't take into account the individuality of another person, if you don't see them just as you don't see yourself, then your relationship with them will develop in a strange way. If you observe relationships carefully and honestly between you and other people, and honestly admit to yourself how much manipulation and insincerity are present, how much manipulative pressure you exert on another person to get what you want. For example, when we want to be liked in order to receive special treatment, and we pretend to be friendly, even though there is no real goodwill. Then you will also understand the level of manipulation within yourself, how you manipulate yourself. Manipulation always has a significant emotional undertone, especially when you somehow emotionally influence another person's feelings or perceptions. This habit of applying emotional pressure within the personality will inevitably spill over into your relationships with others. Then a person doesn't try to understand what happened, but instead starts to become hysterical about it. He throws a tantrum, and in this outburst he wants only one thing: to be given what he wants, to get what he wants. Whether the other person is able to do this or not doesn't concern him. The same thing happens inside when we throw a tantrum at ourselves. All addictions stem from this internal tantrum, when we put so much emotional pressure on ourselves that we can't take it anymore, and so we drink again, use drugs again, buy something new again, buy another book, or sign up for another webinar or course. In other words, this internal tantrum, this inability to withstand internal emotional pressure, will spill over into how you interact with employees, or how susceptible you are to other people's emotional pressure. A person who cannot handle their own emotional pressure cannot handle others either. Is there respect for feelings, respect for the fact that I can't do something, that I feel bad, that I feel uncomfortable? If there is respect for your own feelings like these, it will also be reflected in your attitude toward employees. How do you react to failures and mistakes? When we make mistakes or fail to achieve a goal, it is quite difficult for us not to assign blame, not to blame ourselves or not to blame others. This habit of blaming prevents us from analyzing and understanding why it happened. That is, a detailed analysis with an assessment of the degree of responsibility. This blaming and justifying are also emotional responses. When we blame, it is as if we are punishing the person at the same time. So, by blaming ourselves, we are punishing ourselves for the mistake, but we are not examining the reasons behind it. A manager can act in exactly the same way toward you, and you toward your subordinates, swooping in like a hawk and simply tormenting someone for a mistake as a form of punishment. What is the proportion of pain and anger, patience and conflict, of emotional pressure and explanations? This point is now highlighted separately, but we have already mentioned it while discussing all the others. That is, if a person is immature, if they are not integrated into reality, they will experience a lot of pain and patience. They are more likely pretending to be social than actually being so. And that's why any social interactions become exhausting, because there is too much pretense and play acting. When we are fixated on ourselves, other people irritate us, and we are only interested in them as a source of nourishment, as a way to get something. It is precisely because of this that there is so much anger, because they do not give me what I want, and a lot of patience. In other words, I endure so as not to tear them apart. Or I endure the pain of an imperfect world. The same thing happens inside. When inside, and pain, anger, pain, anger. And these are the two primary emotions. This speaks to the closed-off nature of the personality, to the fact that, unfortunately, it has not yet moved beyond its own subjectivity and wants the world to revolve around itself. There is no real variety of emotions there as such. And now the main 7th point. Please forgive me, today's video will be a bit longer than usual. How long does the feeling of satisfaction last, and how often does it occur? When we talk about the ideal self, the feeling of satisfaction never actually arrives. No matter what achievements a person has, no matter what relationships they have, no matter what job they hold, they cannot experience serene happiness. It's still not right, it's still not enough. There is too much devaluation. And the person asserts themselves through this sense of not right and not enough. The ideal self asserts itself over the real self. And this person cannot find peace, as if they are unable to become truly happy. In the same way, a person may treat their subordinates as if there is nothing to praise them for, as if they never do enough. Because they themselves lack the boundaries of understanding what it means to feel fulfilled and satisfied. And they are unable to give this sense of fulfillment to their subordinates. In the same way, if you have a boss who never gives praise and is always dissatisfied, it means that they have an abyss of an ideal self. And the only hypothetical way for them to feel happiness is if a world named after them comes into being completely and forever. But truly satisfying this desire for happiness is impossible, and so there arises a sense of unhappiness. I will wrap up this video now. Take a moment to observe how you set goals for yourself, how you analyze things, what kind of relationship you have with yourself, and what kind of leader you are to yourself. Would you want a leader like the one you are to yourself? Let me remind you that liking this video and subscribing are the best ways to support us. By returning to these ideas in each new video, we keep building the habit of thinking and feeling more deeply, step by step. It brings us closer to understanding ourselves. Because subjectivity is initially in conflict with reality. And let me remind you that my first book in English is available. You can order it on the webpage, the link is in the description. I also invite you to explore other videos on this channel. For now, I am saying goodbye. See you soon.